have a lot of books. That may not come as a surprise because I am a literature professor. But it's become a problem in my marriage because my husband can't read half of them because they're in German, and I'm running out of bookshelves. So he panics anytime I get a package in the mail because he wants to know where am I going to put all of them. I like to think of my books as something I can pass on to my kids when I'm gone. I don't have any art or stocks. What I do have are enough books to keep them busy for a lifetime. I've decided to write a letter to my sons. But while writing, I realized it's really a letter to all of your children as well, or perhaps to your nieces and nephews. Dear sons, do you remember when we took that trip to Berlin when Jamie was 2? He had just discovered the magic of pushing buttons, and he wanted to push them wherever we went. One day, Jamie, you kept pushing an elevator button over and over and over again. There was a lady on the elevator who got really upset with you. She looked at you and said, "You're the reason all of the elevators in Berlin are broken." Your father and I looked at each other incredulous. It happened again when we were on the bus. There was this big green button just begging to be pushed, and you pushed it over and over and over again. Your father and I scrambled to stop you, and you screeched your ear-piercing scream. There was another elderly woman sitting next to you on the bus. But she didn't get upset. She just looked at you and said, "It's so hard when you're young and you can't do what you want." I was moved by her empathy for you. Because to me, empathy means trying to understand someone even if their experience is different from yours. I wish I would have met a woman like her when I was young. Sons, as you know, I was born in an immigrant Caribbean family. Your grandmother came from Barbados. Your grandfather came from Jamaica. They met in Chicago, and a few years later, I was born, the first generation American. I always felt different. I talked funny, I dressed funny, I was a tomboy, and I listened to punk music. A lot of kids made me feel like an outsider. They didn't want to play with me. But I just wanted to fit in. So I tried to be invisible, so I wouldn't inconvenience anyone. Liam, in that sense, I'm a lot like you. You're not like your brother. You're not a button pusher. But try as I might, I acted in a way that people didn't expect, and that pushed their buttons. Maybe that's why I was always drawn to other immigrant kids. My friends growing up were from Pakistan, from Syria, from Romania and Mexico. For me, difference was exciting. If there was a new kid in class from another country, I wanted to befriend them and learn more about them and where they were from. When I show people my class pictures from elementary school, they say it looks like a UN meeting. But even with all of these diverse friends, I still felt lost. I didn't feel rooted because I often straddled two worlds, Caribbean and American, black and white. Literature helped me feel more rooted. but not American literature, German literature. Now, sons, you may be wondering, how did your mother, a black girl from Chicago, stumble across German literature? Well, by watching movies, of course. When I was 10 years old, my idol was Indiana Jones. He was everything I wasn't. He was white, a man. He was powerful and in control. I was black, a girl, and I felt powerless. He embodied everything I wanted to be, someone who's smart, strong, and fights for what they believe in. His passion was traveling around the world looking for ancient relics to keep them out of the wrong hands. He wanted to put them in museums so that the public could have access to them. His enemies, the Nazis, just wanted them for themselves. He often went undercover to trick the Nazis and spoke German. I wanted to speak German so I could be more like him. I got a few books from the library. My favorite was German in 10 Minutes a Day. And starting in 7th grade, I took German more formally. I thought that having this fictional hero would help me solve my identity problems. A lot of kids have a fictional hero at some point in their childhood. Liam, at age 10, yours has always been Spider-Man. And Jamie, since you're only 2.5, you would probably pick a shark or a dinosaur, something with bite. Identifying with these fictional characters helps kids feel more confident. But as I grew older and became more anxious, I realized having this fictional hero wouldn't be enough to fight my identity problems. But luckily, Indiana Jones had introduced me to German, and learning German would eventually introduce me to German literature, but not until I got to college. Sons, the first time a text really spoke to me was Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. I still remember reading it on the 147 bus on Lakeshore Drive, heading to my college class, trying to finish the text. I didn't expect it to move me and speak to me as much as it did. But here's this text about a guy who wakes up one morning and realizes he's turned into a giant bug. He's living with his family and trying to go about his day as if nothing has happened, hoping they won't notice. I loved how absurd it was, and how Kafka used this metaphor of the bug to convey what alienation feels like. And he was a kind of outsider himself, a German-speaking Jew living in Prague in the Habsburg Empire. This text conveyed everything I was feeling at the time. Unfortunately, college wasn't much better. On the one hand, I was surrounded by nerds like myself, but as a black, working-class girl who'd spent several years in the punk scene, at this elite white university, I kind of felt like the bug in Kafka's story. I sought out other German literature, hoping I could relate to it as well. That's when I found the plays of Bertolt Brecht. He was a communist, and sons, growing up in America, that word was taboo. His ideas excited me. He wrote about oppressed women, the working class, about poverty. Those were things I could relate to. Not the literature, the American literature I had read growing up in school. Novels about Puritans in New England, poetry by old white men walking in the woods. I didn't feel seen in those texts. They conveyed values that didn't relate to me. But in German literature, I found the recognition I was looking for. One of the things I've always loved about German literature is that the question of identity is often central. German studies is the product of the 19th century. It's the product of years and years of Germans struggling to define their identity. For centuries, Germans belonged to the Holy Roman Empire. But in 1806, after Napoleon defeated them, he dissolved the Holy Roman Empire so that Germans could align themselves with the French instead. Living under French rule in this new confederation, Germans felt anxious about their identity. They asked themselves, without a German nation, who are we? What does it mean to be German? Several authors suggested looking to literature, such as theater or fairy tales. Since then, Germany has existed in many different forms, and each time the lines were redrawn, people looked to literature to help define themselves. Nowadays, the German authors that I like to read would be described as post-migrant. Post-migrant means these are authors who were born in Germany and grew up there, but their parents and grandparents immigrated there from somewhere else. Nevertheless, their experience of Germany is impacted by their family's story of migration. This term, post-migrant, actually doesn't exist in America. But after encountering it in German, I finally had a word to describe how I felt growing up in America. Sons, this is why I decided to get a PhD in German literature and not a more lucrative field like science or medicine. And this is why we were poor in finances but rich in books. Interestingly, I chose to study German literature and not English because I was trying to get away from my identity problems. But just like that big green button, my identity kept calling me back. Now, I study literature by and about Black women. They just happen to be German. Sons, this journey has taught me how important literature can be for helping you craft an identity. Literature helps you see the similarities and differences between yourself and others. It helps you see where I end and you begin. And my experience reading foreign literature has also taught me a lot about empathy. A lot of people think that the best way to deal with difference is to ignore it or perhaps ban it. But by limiting children's access to diverse stories, you limit their possibilities. You deny them the opportunity to craft an identity of their own. This reminds me of a poem by Black German author Mai Ayim called Das sind Menschen wie wir. Wir sind wirklich der Meinung, dass alle Menschen gleich sind. Niemand sollte diskriminiert werden, bloß weil anders ist. We really believe that all people are the same. No one should be discriminated against just because they're different. We could acknowledge difference without attaching a value to it. Each one of us is different, and that's the beauty of humanity. Sons, that's why I always bought you books with diverse characters and stories. I knew that there might come a day where you feel out of place. especially as biracial children in a world that demands fixed categories. Just remember that literature can help you grow confident in who you are and still be open enough to accept the differences of others. Also remember that sometimes it's good to push people's buttons. They may feel inconvenienced because you've interrupted what would otherwise be a smooth journey, but pushing people's buttons can make them stop somewhere unexpected and take the time to experience something different. So sons, keep pushing those buttons, and I hope that you learn to read, or love to read as much as I do. And when you inherit all of those books of mine, that you don't just donate them, but keep a few and perhaps read them as well. And if I could choose some for you, they would be the German ones. Thank you.